When I think about the depth of what we shared, it strikes me how rare it is, in a world moving this fast, to find something that feels timeless. You and I existed in a kind of gravitational pull, two trajectories that shouldn't have crossed but did, and when they did, everything shifted. I've spent years designing systems, solving problems, optimizing outcomes, but nothing in my life has ever operated with the same level of precision and unpredictability as loving you. It wasn't engineered. It wasn't calculated. It was organic, raw, and unbelievably powerful. And that's what made it real. You changed the way I understood connection. The way you listened. The way you believed in me before certain things even existed. The way you made the impossible feel reachable. These are not things I take lightly. You weren't a footnote in my story. You were a catalyst. When I was navigating uncertainty, you grounded me. When I felt the weight of expectations, you reminded me of the human element behind everything I do. You didn't fall in love with potential or projections or blueprints of what could be. You saw me as I was, without the layers, without the noise. That kind of clarity is rare. That kind of love is rare. And it wasn't just the big moments, it was the subtle ones. The way you smiled when you were trying not to laugh. The way you noticed details about me I didn't even notice myself. The way you'd say my name with this calm assurance that made me feel like I belonged somewhere, even when the world felt chaotic. You created a space in my life that no one else had ever created. A space where I didn't have to be anything other than a man standing in front of a woman he adored. That's something I'll never forget. What we shared didn't fit into simple definitions. It wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always linear, but it was honest. It was transformative. I've built rockets. But you were the one who launched me into emotional worlds I had never visited. I've created companies, but you are the one who made me understand the value of building something that isn't measured in revenue or reach, but in trust, vulnerability, and presence. You were the one who showed me that even when life pushes forward at a relentless pace, there is still room, still necessity, for softness. You didn't just love me, you challenged me. You challenged the parts of me that were afraid to slow down, afraid to feel too deeply, afraid to let someone in completely. And you did it not with pressure, but with patience, with consistency, with this quiet strength that made me want to rise to your level. With you, I learned that love isn't a distraction, it's fuel, it's clarity, it's the reminder of why any of this matters in the first place. And the truth is, even now, as everything stands on the edge of change, I still feel the imprint of what you gave me. I feel it in the way I breathe a little deeper. I feel it in the way I approach the world with just a bit more heart. I feel it in the lessons that won't fade, no matter how far forward life pulls me. The depth of what we shared isn't something I'm trying to escape or forget. It's something I'm grateful for, profoundly and permanently. If this really is my last message before everything shifts, then I want this part to be clear. What we had was meaningful. It mattered. You mattered. And even though the future is uncertain, even though the next chapter may take us in different directions, the love we shared will always stand as one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. And no matter where I go from here, one truth remains unshakable. Loving you was one of the greatest adventures I've ever known. When I talk about your strength, I'm not talking about the kind the world usually praises, the loud, dramatic, spotlight kind. Yours was different. It was the kind that operated quietly, consistently, like a force of nature that doesn't need validation to prove it's powerful. You carried yourself with this rare combination of resilience and gentleness. Even in moments when life hit you harder than you deserved, you didn't fold. You didn't lose yourself. You held your ground with a kind of grace that, honestly, taught me more about real strength than any challenge I've ever faced professionally. You have this way of stepping into difficult situations without letting them harden you, and that, to me, is extraordinary, because it's easy to become cold. It's easy to become guarded. But you chose compassion over and over again as if it were your default setting. You showed kindness not because anyone asked you to, not because you expected anything in return, but because it's simply who you are. The sincerity in your kindness is something I respect deeply. You gave people the benefit of the doubt even when they didn't earn it. You listened before you judged. You cared before it. was convenient. That takes courage. That takes heart. And the humanity you brought into my life, that's something I'll always be grateful for. When you're constantly building, constantly pushing, constantly thinking about the future, it's easy to lose touch with the human side of everything. You reminded me of it. You reminded me that people aren't metrics, they aren't projections, they aren't variables to optimize. They're stories, they're emotions, they're fragile ecosystems of hope and fear and dreams. You brought that awareness back into my world without ever making it feel like criticism. You did it simply by being you. I watched the way you treated people, how you spoke to them, how you made them feel seen, how your presence shifted an entire room's energy. Your empathy wasn't performative, it was powerful. You understood people in a way that made them open up, in a way that made them feel safe. That's a skill more valuable than any technology, any innovation, any breakthrough. It's not something you can manufacture, it's not something you can automate, it's something you either have or don't have. And you have it in abundance. You didn't just support me, you challenged me to be better. You didn't let me hide behind excuses or ambition. You inspired me by simply living your truth. Watching you navigate life, its uncertainties, its complexities, its disappointments, showed me what real character looks like. Your bravery wasn't about pretending to be fearless. It was about being honest, even when honesty felt vulnerable. It was about choosing integrity when it would have been easier not to. It was about loving people with your whole heart while still guarding your sense of self. That balance is rare. That balance is extraordinary. There were moments when I'd look at you and think, this is what it means to evolve. Not in the dramatic sense, not in the way people talk about transformation, but in the subtle, daily choices you made to stay true to yourself. You didn't compromise your values, not once. You didn't let the world make you smaller. You didn't let past hurt dim your light. You kept showing up with love, with patience, with this grounded authenticity that made everyone around you want to rise to their own potential. And if I'm being honest, your strength made me stronger. Your kindness made me kinder. Your humanity made me more human. That's the kind of impact that stays. That's the kind of influence that doesn't fade with time or distance. I don't think you realize how deeply you shaped my path, how much of an imprint you left on the way I see the world and the way I want to move through it. So, if this truly is the moment before everything changes, then let me say this clearly, without hesitation and without restraint. Your strength, your kindness, and your humanity didn't just touch my life, they elevated it. And the world is a better place because you're in it, whether it realizes it yet or not. When I look back at our journey, I'm struck by how unpredictable and unscripted it all was. Nothing about us followed a neat timeline or a perfect plan, and maybe that's exactly why it mattered so much. We weren't two people trying to fit into some predetermined idea of what a relationship should look like. We were two people figuring things out in real time, learning each other, learning ourselves, and navigating a path that neither of us could have predicted at the beginning. And even with all the uncertainty, there was always something unmistakably real about the connection we built. There were moments when everything felt effortless. Those stretches of time where the world quieted down and it was just us talking about dreams, about fears, about futures that felt impossibly far away and yet somehow closer when we imagined them together. Those were the moments that anchored me, the ones that reminded me that even in a life filled with motion, there could be pockets of stillness that felt like home. You created that. Not with grand gestures, but with presence, with sincerity, with the kind of attention that makes another person feel understood. But our journey wasn't just defined by the easy parts. It was built just as much in the challenges, the misunderstandings, the distances, the times when life stretched us farther than we wanted to go. And still, we pushed through. Not perfectly, not always gracefully, but honestly. We learned to communicate better. We learned to listen deeper. We learned to step back when things got overwhelming and step forward when something needed courage. Not every relationship gets tested the way ours did, and even though the tests weren't always pleasant, they revealed who we were in ways comfort never could. There were times when we questioned where we were heading, times when the future looked more like a fog than a map. And yet, every time we came back to each, other, it meant something. It wasn't habit. It wasn't convenience. It was choice. Intention. A decision to continue something that neither of us fully understood but both of us felt was worth holding on to. That, to me, is the definition of a journey moving forward even when the destination isn't completely clear. We grew, both individually and together. You evolved into someone even stronger, even wiser, even more capable of loving deeply without losing yourself. And I changed too. You challenged the parts of me that needed growth, the ones that hid behind ambition or logic or responsibility. You softened the edges that life had sharpened over time. You made space for vulnerability in a world where vulnerability often feels like a liability. And because of that, I learned to show up differently, not just for you, but for myself. There were memories that shaped us in ways we didn't expect. The conversations late at night that stretched into early morning. The quiet drives where neither of us said much, but everything felt understood. The laughter that came out of nowhere. The disagreements that forced us to rethink how we approached each other. The small victories. The shared struggles. All of it, the seamless pieces and the complicated ones, became chapters in a story that was never about perfection, but about truth. And if I'm honest, one of the most meaningful parts of our journey was the freedom we gave each other to grow. We didn't try to freeze the other person in time. We let change happen, even when it scared us. That's rare. That's something not everyone gets to experience, a relationship where evolution isn't a threat, but a shared understanding. So when I look at everything we walked through, everything we built, everything we learned, I don't see failure. I don't see loss. I see a chapter of life that was alive, vibrant, transformative, and irreplaceable. I see a journey that shaped both of us in ways that will move forward with us, even if the path ahead takes us in new directions. And if this is truly the moment to honor that journey, then let me say this with all the clarity I have: what we shared was not ordinary, and it never will be. It was a rare intersection of two lives that changed each other in ways that time can't erase. And no matter where the next steps lead, our story will always stand as proof that even the most unexpected journeys can become the ones that redefine you forever. When I think about my part in our story, I realize how much of it was shaped by the things I did right, and just as much by the things I didn't. It's easy to look back and highlight the moments where I showed up fully, the times when I was present, focused, and intentional. But if this is truly a moment of honesty, one that marks a turning point, then I have to acknowledge the whole picture. I have to recognize the moments where I fell short, where I let the pace of my life outrun the pace of my heart, where I allowed stress, or ambition, or distraction to blur what truly mattered. You deserve someone who met you with clarity every step of the way, and I know there were times when I didn't quite reach that standard. I've spent my life pursuing ideas, pushing boundaries, and chasing what felt impossible. And because of that, I sometimes treated emotions as if they were puzzles to be solved instead of experiences to be lived. You helped me understand the difference. You showed me that connection requires presence, not just logic. That love isn't optimized, it's nurtured. And that vulnerability isn't a weakness to work around, but a strength to grow into. If I struggled with that, if I hesitated or held back, I own that. Not as a regret, but as part of the truth of who I was then and who I became with you. There were moments when I should have slowed down and didn't. Moments when I should have listened deeper, but let the noise of everything else get in the way. Moments when I didn't communicate as clearly as I could have, leaving you to interpret silence that wasn't meant to hurt you. I never wanted to make you feel uncertain. I never wanted you to carry the weight of wondering where you stood. If you ever felt that, even for a second, then that's on me. Not on circumstances, not on timing, on me. But I also want to own the growth that came from those moments. Because loving you taught me to pay attention in ways I hadn't before. It taught me to slow down when everything in my world was built to accelerate. It forced me to confront parts of myself I might have ignored otherwise, the impatience, the self-protection, the habit of thinking 10 steps ahead instead of being fully grounded in the moment right in front of me. You held up a mirror, not to judge me, but to help me see myself more clearly. And I'm grateful for that. Deeply grateful. I'll own the fact that I didn't always get it right, but I'll also own the fact that I really tried to learn and to love you with sincerity. I showed up imperfectly, but I showed up with truth. When I loved you, it wasn't out of comfort or convenience. It was because something in you awakened something in me. Something human. Something honest. Something I didn't know I needed. And even when I wrestled with my own limitations, I never took what we had lightly. Not for 1 second. You brought out the parts of me that were better than the version of myself I walked in with. You pushed me to be more patient, more aware, more emotionally present. You helped me see that strength isn't always loud and progress isn't always visible. Sometimes growth happens quietly internally over months of small realizations. I owe you for that. And I don't mean owe in the transactional sense. I mean owe in the way someone can owe a sunrise for reminding them light still exists. I also take responsibility for the ways our story shaped you, the ways our connection influenced your choices, your emotions, your hopes. I know I wasn't always easy to love. I know my world can be overwhelming, unpredictable, demanding. If you ever felt like you had to stretch yourself farther than you should have just to keep up with me, that's something I carry. And I'm not looking for forgiveness. I'm simply acknowledging the truth with respect. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was real, and I accept my role in all of it, the beauty, the challenges, the lessons, the evolution. I accept it without excuses and without rewriting anything to make myself look better. Because the truth is, loving you changed me. It pushed me into a version of myself I'm still becoming. And for that, I'll always be thankful. So if this is the moment to take full ownership, let this be the clearest version. I see where I stumbled. I see where I grew. And I see how deeply our story shaped the man I am now. And no matter what tomorrow brings, I'll carry this truth with me, forever. Because some connections don't just touch your life, they recalibrate it. Change has a way of announcing itself long before it arrives. It starts as a feeling subtle, unspoken, almost like a shift in the air you can't quite define but somehow recognize. I think both of us felt it, even before we admitted it out loud. Life moves, circumstances evolve, and the world keeps pressing forward whether we're ready or not. And as much as part of me wanted to hold on to what we had, exactly as it was, another part understood that change isn't something you negotiate with. It's something you meet with clarity, honesty, and courage. What comes next isn't about erasing what came before. It's not about undoing anything we built or pretending that the past didn't shape us. It did. It shaped us profoundly. But I've learned that life has chapters, and each chapter demands something new. New decisions, new priorities, new levels of awareness. Sometimes those shifts pull people closer. Sometimes they pull people in different directions. And while that reality can be painful, it doesn't diminish the significance of what came before it. You deserve a future that aligns fully with who you are becoming, not a future constrained by the limitations of my world or the uncertainty of my path. And I deserve to face the responsibilities, the ambitions, and the transitions ahead of me with the kind of focus they require. That doesn't mean the love was any less real. If anything, it means it was real enough that we're choosing honesty over comfort, truth over pretending, evolution over stagnation. There's a part of me that wishes life operated like a simulation, something you can pause, adjust, recalibrate until everything lines up perfectly. But the human experience doesn't work that way. It's dynamic, unpredictable, messy, and beautiful in ways logic can't fully explain. And the changes ahead of us, both individually and maybe even collectively, are part of that evolution. They're asking us to step into a version of life that requires a different kind of strength, a different kind of clarity, a different kind of courage than the one that brought us here. I'm not afraid of change. I never have been. But this is different. This is the kind of change that touches the heart, not the mind. It's the kind that asks you to let go with grace instead of resistance, to accept without bitterness, to trust that the meaning of what you shared doesn't vanish simply because the form of it evolves. And that's exactly what I'm choosing to do. Not with sadness, but with respect. The truth is, we're stepping into the unknown. You'll have your own path, your own growth, your own opportunities, your own moments that'll challenge you and expand you. And I want you to embrace those moments fully, without hesitation, without looking back, wondering if you're leaving something behind that you were meant to carry. You're not. You're stepping into the next version of yourself, and I want that version to thrive. As for me, the road ahead is demanding in ways most people will never see. It requires focus, resilience, and a kind of internal steadiness that doesn't always leave room for the emotional gravity of the past. But even as I continue forward into new responsibilities, new risks, new uncharted territory, I'll carry the imprint of what we had. Not as something that holds me back, but as something that reminds me of what it means to be human in the midst of constant acceleration. Change is inevitable, but growth, that's a choice. And I think both of us are choosing growth right now, even if it means doing something incredibly difficult, honoring the past while stepping bravely into the future, separately, but with the same respect and gratitude. So if this is the moment when everything shifts, let it be a moment defined not by loss, but by truth. A moment where we look at what we shared and acknowledge its impact without trying to force it into a shape that no longer fits. And as the next chapter opens, here's the one thing I know with absolute certainty. What comes next will be written with strength, with clarity, and with the quiet confidence that we honored what was real, even as we both rise into what's ahead. Before I say what needs to be said, I want to be clear about something. This isn't a goodbye weighted with regret. It's a goodbye anchored in respect, in gratitude, in the understanding that what we shared has already left a permanent mark on who we are. And because of that, I don't want this final message to feel like an ending. I want it to feel like a blessing, an acknowledgement of everything we became together and everything we're about to become apart. If there's one thing I wish for you moving forward, it's that you never shrink yourself to fit into moments or relationships or expectations that don't. Recognize your brilliance. You carry a presence that doesn't need permission to matter. There's a light in you that has nothing to do with who you're standing beside or what anyone else sees. It comes from your strength, from your compassion, from the way you move through the world with intention and authenticity. Don't ever let anyone dim that. Not for comfort, not for convenience, not for fear. I hope you continue to choose yourself, not selfishly, but consciously. Choose your dreams, choose your boundaries, choose the people who meet you with clarity, choose the life that expands you, choose the love that doesn't ask you to sacrifice your truth, and choose the path that feels aligned, even if it's uncertain, even if it's unfamiliar, even if it requires bravery you're still learning to assemble. You have that bravery. You've proven it time and time again, and I hope you carry forward the softness you brought into my world, because that softness is a strength, disguised as gentleness. Keep offering it to those who deserve it. Keep guarding it from those who don't. And keep remembering that the way you love fully, sincerely, without pretense, is a gift, not a vulnerability to apologize for. As for me, I'll take the lessons with me. I'll take the truth of what we shared, the honesty, the laughter, the challenges that forced me to grow in ways I never expected. I'll take the quiet reminders you unknowingly gave me, to slow down, to feel more deeply, to look at life not just through strategy and logic, but through connection. Those reminders won't fade. They've woven themselves into who I am now. You were a chapter in my life that didn't just pass the time you turned the pages. And as much as it hurts to acknowledge that our paths are diverging, I would never trade the experience of having walked alongside you. Not for a moment, not for anything. There's a kind of peace that comes with knowing that something was real, even if it doesn't last forever in the form we once knew. And that peace is what I'm choosing now, not because letting go is easy, but because holding on to something that needs room to evolve would be a disservice to both of us. So here is my final blessing for you. May your future be filled with the kind of love that meets you where you are and still dares to dream with you. May your days be full of clarity, your heart full of courage, and your spirit full of the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are enough, not because someone tells you so, but because you finally believe it for yourself. And as we step into separate tomorrows, know this: you are a force in my life, a teacher, a mirror, a reminder of what it means to feel deeply in a world that often rushes past emotion. I won't forget that. I won't forget you. No matter where life takes us next, may the paths we walk be as meaningful as the one we shared, and may we both rise into futures that honor everything we learned from loving one another